In 1948, the Jewish state of Israel was created through a war in which a population mostly composed of recently arrived colonists pushed out much of the majority population of indigenous Palestinian Muslims and Christians. In 1967, Israel initiated a war of expansion, pushing out still more Palestinians and confiscating additional land. Israel has occupied the Palestinian West Bank ever since. After similarly occupying the Gaza Strip for decades, Israel eventually withdrew its settlers and imposed a blockade of Gaza, largely imprisoning its population and causing a growing humanitarian crisis. All of this violates international law. When Palestinians have periodically tried to resist their dispossession and oppression, the powerful Israeli military has suppressed these uprisings. Israeli forces frequently invade both the West Bank and Gaza, killing and injuring numerous men, women, and children. Israel's actions have been enabled by the pro-Israel lobby, which has operated in the US for many decades. In 2016 and 17, American journalist Clayton Swisher produced an investigative report about this lobby for the Al Jazeera News Network. The report included footage obtained by British undercover reporter Tony Kleinfeld, who infiltrated several pro-Israel organizations. When Israel partisans in the US learned of the film, they successfully pressured Al Jazeera not to broadcast it. Eventually, the documentary was leaked, and its explosive information became public. Despite the significance of its content, US media failed to tell Americans about it. The following is an abridged version of the film.
In 2005, Palestinian civil rights groups sought a peaceful means to protest against Israel's occupation. They identified goods from Israel and called for their boycott. The BDS movement was born.
BDS adopted a nonviolent strategy because we think it is morally consistent and very effective against an enemy that is extremely powerful militarily. We called for boycotting Israel, divesting from it, and eventually imposing sanctions on it, as was done against apartheid South Africa, to achieve basic Palestinian rights under international law.
BDS is saying that what Israel has to do is treat the Palestinians in its midst the same way it treats Israeli Jews.
The secretive Ministry of Strategic Affairs, based in the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem, was given a mission: establish a covert campaign to defeat the BDS movement.
אנחנו אחראים על המאבק בתופעה, ובמסגרת זו יש לנו 4 רגליים: התראה, הרתעה, התקפה והסברה. אז אני אגיד לך שכשאם אתה רוצה לנצח בניהול מערכה, אתה צריך לעשות את זה עם הרבה מאוד עמימות. כמו שכשעבדתי על סוגיות צבאיות, כמו חיזבאללה, או כספי טרור, או סוריה, או כל מדינה אחרת שאיתה בעבר ניהלתי מערכה מולה כקמן. לא הלכנו ואמרנו לצד השני מה אנחנו מתכוונים לעשות. השארנו אותו בעמימות.
Tony's boss at the Israel Project used to work at AIPAC, where debate about Israel's actions or Palestinian rights were rarely prominent.
Does the war of ideas matter? I don't know. I know that getting $38 billion in security aid to Israel matters, which is what AIPAC just did. That's what I'm proud to have been a part of for so long. My job was basically to convince students that participating in the war of ideas on campus is actually a distraction. You can hold up signs and have rallies on campus, but the Congress gets $3.1 billion a year for Israel. Everything AIPAC does is focused on influencing Congress. Congress is where you have leverage, so you can't influence the President of the United States directly, but the Congress can.
AIPAC is very interested in making sure that every representative and every senator toes the line on Israel. And it is highly effective in that regard. That's why it's considered to be synonymous in many people's heads with the lobby.
AIPAC's website shows members of Congress attending its conferences and declaring their support for Israel.
And on behalf of Congress, thank you for sending a clear and unequivocal message to the world that the United States stands with Israel now, tomorrow, and always.
I reject the BDS movement, whether it be on campuses in France and London or right here in the United States of America.
To get elected in the American political system, you need lots of money. What AIPAC does is it makes sure that money is funneled your way if you're seen as pro-Israel, and it'll go to significant lengths to make sure that you stay in office if you continue to be staunchly pro-Israel.
May God bless Israel. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
They have questionnaires. Anybody running for Congress is expected to fill out a questionnaire. And they evaluate the depth of your commitment to Israel on the basis of that questionnaire. Then you have an interview with local people. If you get AIPAC support, then more often than not, you're going to win.
Jim Moran is a Democrat who represented a congressional district in Northern Virginia. Our undercover reporter wanted to learn more about how funding is secured for congressmen.
Speaking of the devil.
David Oakes, a prominent pro-Israel advocate, invited Tony to a fundraising event. Oakes later called him to discuss the details.
Is it just a social event?
No, hold on. I'm going to email you a list of the people that this group supports. This is the biggest ad hoc political group and definitely the wealthiest in D.C. Hold on. Mark Kirk, the senator from Illinois. Ted Deutsch from Florida. Barbara Comstock, she's the congressman from Virginia. Richard Byrd from North Carolina. Kelly Ayotte, she's fantastic. She's in the Arms Committee. They'll walk in the room and they'll say, everything here is off the record. And then they'll say, here's a little bit about me, and then people will ask very specific questions.
The fundraiser was being held in a wealthy suburb of Washington.
The AIPAC group, it makes a difference. It really, really does. It's the best bang for your buck, and the networking is phenomenal. Congressmen and senators don't do anything unless you pressure them. They kick the can down the road unless you pressure them. And the only way to do that is with money.
Right now, our current contribution limit from any person to a candidate is $2,700. Now, that's a lot of money, you know, and that can certainly buy some gratitude with the lawmaker. But if you really want to add punch to that type of buying of favors, what you do is you get 50 or 100 people together at an event like this, all chipping in $2,700, and then you bundle it all together and hand over the total amount to the lawmaker. At that point, we're talking anywhere up to $250,000. So suddenly you've got a group of people with the same demand they want from the lawmaker handing over $250,000. That buys a lawmaker.
The fundraiser was for Anthony Brown, who ran for Congress in November 2016.
This is direct spending. Brown's going to use that $30,000 to do ad campaigns. So they strategically pick the ones who are in the close reaches that they want to build relationships with. So we want the Jewish community to go face to face in a small environment, 50, 30, 40 people, and say, this is what's important to us. We wanted to make sure if we give you money that you're going to enforce the Iran deal. That way, when they need something from him or her, like the Iran deal, they can quickly mobilize and say, look, we'll give you $30,000. They actually impact it.
He's actually saying we're buying these office holders. And that's the point. We're chipping in all this money so we can hand over $100,000 or $200,000 to the office holders so we can buy them.
You're not supposed to advertise. There's all these advertising laws. I was surprised they had an invite. I've never seen an actual invite before.
Oakes described a similar event he attended in New York, which included donors from Wall Street.
In New York, with Jeff Talbot, we don't ask a goddamn thing about the Palestinians. You know why? Because it's a tiny issue, that's why. It's a small, insignificant issue. The big issue is Iran. We want everything focused on Iran. What happens is Jeff meets with the congressman in the back room, tells them exactly what his goals are. And by the way, Jeff Talbot is worth $250 million. Basically, they hand him an envelope with 20 credit cards and say, you can swipe each of these credit cards for $1,000 each.
There is a disclosure law that is designed to highlight whether there may be potential money laundering going on in events like this. And that is if the funds are earmarked. And that means the organization has to disclose who showed up at that event and how much each individual chipped in and what they handed over to the lawmaker.
What's the name of the group that puts this on?
It doesn't have a name. There's no name. It's an ad hoc political group. For all the legal reasons, people pool their money.
What this specific group is doing to try to avoid that disclosure requirement, it isn't taking money and then putting it in its own account and then handing it over to the office holder. It's just collecting credit card information and then turning that over directly to the candidate. Therefore, it's not violating the earmarking law, and they're not reporting this. All we would see on the campaign finance reports are the individuals who contributed, but there'd be no record on those campaign finance reports that they worked together as a bundling group, that they were all at this event. All we'd know is person A gave $2,700, person B gave $2,700, and we'd have no idea they're working in tandem with each other.
The one in New York is $10,000 over 2 cycles. It's a minimum commitment. Some people give a lot more than that. Whatever your commitment is. So, like, if you give $5,000, Jeff will ensure that I don't go over the $2,600. You know what I'm saying?
If one is at a meeting where person A wants to give $5,000, another person has only $100 to give, and that person gave $2,500 to the other person at that meeting as a gift, and they both therefore gave a total of $5,000, $5,100, would that be illegal?
That would be illegal. That would be laundering of campaign contributions. The limit applies to the individual. And so each individual is subject to that $2,700 limit. And if any individual goes over that limit, they are violating the contribution limit. They cannot legally do that by laundering money through other individuals.
If you give $5,000, Jeff will ensure that I don't go over the $2,600. You know what I'm saying?
A relatively small number of families supply hundreds of millions of dollars annually to lobby politicians.
The 200 families whose giving constitutes 90% of all political giving are not giving because they want a government contract or because it's good for their business. They're doing it because they actually care. In my view, it's obscene how much money there is.
One of the most effective uses of the lobby's funds occurs when Congress is on its break.
Every year, they fly hundreds of members of Congress to Israel for these extended travel junkets that are really lavish. They're first-rate vacations. They'll rack up $20,000 or more for a vacation for a member of Congress. The member can bring along their spouse, and they have a great time.
An attempt was made to change the law so that all expenses-paid trips would be considered a bribe.
I drafted legislation to try to reform the whole profession of lobbying to get rid of free travel and gifts from lobbyists. The Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007 significantly enhanced the travel restrictions that if you're an organization that employs a lobbyist, you can only provide a one-day trip for a member of Congress.
Then AIPAC exerted its influence.
There was a major loophole written into the travel restriction that was essentially engineered by AIPAC, and this loophole is widely known as the AIPAC loophole.
The clause excluded educational trips organized by a charity that didn't hire lobbyists. AIPAC happened to be affiliated to such a charity.
It doesn't have an office, it doesn't have any employees, it's just a tax form that they filed. Gifts of dinner, gifts of wonderful resorts to stay at, gifts of entertainment, all of which is packed up into one of these trips, is a very, very effective tool at influence peddling.
Most of our donors were like nudniks, like schleppers. The quality is starting to improve. We're attracting more impressive people. Until recently, the people we're attracting, was the guy who's wealthy, gives away $25,000 a year, $10,000 is to us, and this is his hobby and full-time job, and he won't shut the up or stop calling. We're finally starting to expand into the class of donors that AIPAC has, which is like the more elite, easier to work with, smart, strategic, writing big checks kind of money. It takes just as much time to get a $10,000 check from someone as it does getting $500,000.
The money raised by AIPAC doesn't just fund congressmen who support their goals.
If you wander off the reservation and you become critical of Israel, you not only will not get money, AIPAC will go to great lengths to find somebody to run against you and support that person very generously. And the end result is you're likely to lose your seat in Congress.
They threaten. They immediately threaten. Even if they know that AIPAC can't defeat them, AIPAC can make their lives more difficult. They can make sure that their next town meeting or something, some members of the Jewish congregation jump up and say, "But you're anti-Israel."
In 2002, AIPAC was lobbying Moran to vote for the invasion of Iraq.
The executive director of AIPAC said that his most important accomplishment was securing the authorization for the use of U.S. military force in Iraq. AIPAC was pushing it very hard.
Why does AIPAC benefit from the United States going to war?
The United States getting involved in wars in the Middle East is ultimately in Israel's interest, because we have a stake in the region.
Congressman Moran refused to vote for the invasion, as AIPAC requested.
There are compelling, fundamental reasons why this body should oppose this resolution.
Then at a public meeting, he was asked a question.
A Jewish woman actually stood up in a town hall. She said, why aren't more Jews involved in the marches against the war? I said, if the leaders of the Jewish community were opposed to the war, I think that would make a difference.
The lobby reacted, claiming this was evidence of Moran's belief in a Jewish conspiracy that was leading America to war.
There was a conservative rabbi in my district who was assigned to me, I assume, by AIPAC. And he had warned me that if I voice my views about the Israeli lobby, that my career would be over, and implied that it would be done through the Post. And sure enough, the Washington Post editorialized brutally. Everybody ganged up.
So what are the main outlets that TIP work with?
Washington Post is the biggest one.
Okay. Isn't that like just down there or something?
Yeah, it's actually that building.
Moran claims the Washington Post's editorial board has a close relationship with AIPAC.
The principal editorial board of the Post itself has been a very effective instrument because they've been able to maintain their credibility. And it's a great paper in every other way, but because they have such credibility, they're extremely effective.
Everyone knew he wasn't anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism has come to mean anti-Israel. The AIPAC crowd doesn't really care very much about whether or not a person likes Jews or wants one to move next door. All they care about is what their position is on Israel.
Both of my daughters married Jewish men. My grandchildren are Jewish. Anybody that considers me anti-Semite is ignorant.
During his summer in Washington, Tony investigated how the lobby is responding to the growing support for BDS among students. AIPAC has an established network across high schools and universities and is also part of the wider campus coalition against BDS.
I work with the DC schools, so I can connect you to Georgetown, GW, American. I think that you would really benefit from a conversation with the Israel on Campus Coalition. They also coordinate a lot between organizations. So like AIPAC, we focus on political. We have one very specific, very effective angle for combating BDS. But the ICC pools resources from all of the campus organizations so that like they're tapped in on all angles.
The Israel on Campus Coalition is a coordinating group at the front line of the battle against BDS.
We built up this massive national political campaign to crush them and to fight back and to fight fire with fire. What we saw was a growing global movement to destroy Israel that was manifesting on American college campuses.
The Israel on Campus Coalition is at the center of the lobby's response to BDS.
There are about 100, maybe 120 now professionals that are working for a dozen national ICC partner organizations like AIPAC and Hasbara Fellowships and Stand With Us and Hillel and Chabad and API.
Stand With Us and the ICC have a particularly close relationship.
The Israel on Campus Coalition, they really oversee like the whole movement. They're sort of the ones that like have the bird's eye view. Let's just say like next week, a BDS resolution comes to campus. So the ICC will be the ones, they'll organize a conference call with all the partners. So they might say, okay, stand with us, we need a little bit more of your help because we need something regarding like what's like BDS resolution. The campus newspaper wants us to write like an op-ed, can you guys help like the op-ed? So they'll sort of be the ones and they'll sort of be overseeing it.
Stand With Us holds an annual conference in Los Angeles. Its focus is on how to fight the BDS movement.
To reveal the true nature of BDS, a venomous, deceitful, anti-peace, anti-coexistence movement that will settle for nothing short of the annihilation of the Jewish state.
At a social event held by a pro-Israel advocacy group, Tony finds out more about Stand With Us. Many here are recent graduates with backgrounds in student politics.
I was the chief of staff for my friend who is our student senator. We had Stand With Us write some checks, but we didn't let them put their logo on it. It's just our names on the logo. We didn't want that association because on Berkeley campus, if you don't know, they hate Stand With Us.
As well as working behind the scenes to provide funds, Stand With Us helps pro-Israel groups denounce students who support equal rights for Palestinians.
We've used Stand With Us strategically on my campus to have them publish stuff when we wanted stuff published. One girl that was running for our student senate, her last name's Dick, to my event.
The summer of 2014, the Gaza bombings happened. There's a lot of activity in the Bay Area, a lot of protests. You hear like, intifada, intifada, intifada. So, and I asked them, and I was like, oh, what does that mean?
When Sumaya stood for the Student Senate at Berkeley, the Arabic word meaning uprising inspired her election slogan.
My last name means faith and governance, a way of life. There was other hashtags, so it was like Din for the Win, Din Dynasty. I didn't really like them. So when I launched my campaign, it just seemed fitting to launch it with, hashtag Dintifada.
She ran on the hashtag Dintifada. That's her Dintifada. Her last name's Din. So my Din. And we're like, this isn't okay.
Stand With Us and launched a social media assault on Sumayya's campaign and her character.
We had a campaign party, the launch party, and an hour later, I'm getting all these messages.
We had Stand With Us attack this girl in an article, at least on their Facebook.
It's just an Arabic word, meaning uprising, and they redefined it to then serve their own purpose.
Sumayya received a barrage of abuse on social media. They called you a frustrated, sexually repressed woman. They said you were scum. They wanted to kick you out of the country. How hard was all that to deal with?
Yeah, I distanced myself from that. I would go out and I would be walking on campus. Everyone would be looking at me. I felt like I needed to hide. It took me 3 days. I didn't sleep. I was just like, what's going on?
We don't want Stand With Us's name, on our name. They have all sorts of followers, and some of those people are a little crazy. You have people that saying, that person should die. This girl was getting death threats. People are like, she's a terrorist, blah, blah, blah.
How involved are they on campus politics then? Even if it's
money. They give money. But it's rare that they put their name on something because the leadership that I helped create on that campus is aware that it ruins relationships.
At the Israel on Campus Coalition in Washington, Tony discovered that the lobby is deliberately adopting a clandestine approach on campuses.
We should stand behind our work, not in front of it. It's not helpful for Stand With Us to say to a pro-Israel student, or the Israel Project to say to a pro-Israel student, oh, sure, we'll help you, but you have to put our logo on it. We're working so closely with Stand With Us, and we have such a tight partnership with them today that it's totally seamless.
Tony also discovered that anonymity is a key strand of the campaign against BDS.
If one of these terrorists on campus wants to disrupt a pro-Israel lecture or something and unfurl a banner or whatever else, we're going to investigate them, look into bad stuff they've done. That stuff becomes very useful in the moment, and there are any number of ways to push it out. The only thing is that we do it securely and anonymously, and that's the key.
Julia was president of the pro-Israel group at Davis, which is part of the University of California. The growing support for the BDS movement in Davis and the lobby's response to it is part of a narrative that's unfolding across America's campuses. Students for Justice in Palestine, or SJP, brought a divestment motion before the Student Senate.
I was very, very nervous. The entire room was filled. I think we had about 600 students and people from the community coming in to witness this vote.
I am here today because, quite frankly, I am ashamed. I am ashamed of my university for supporting apartheid genocide of my people in Palestine.
I ended the speech with something along the lines of being on the right side of history, and for the university to end its unethical ties with these corporations who were doing brutal things to Palestinians.
We knew they were going to win because our entire student senate was all pro-BDS.
Students streamed the hearing online. The pro-Israel group also filmed it with another purpose in mind. Their videos would play a key part in the story that was to unfold in the days ahead. Julia and her pro-Israel allies had already decided that they didn't want to debate.
At 4 a.m. the night before, me and my team were like, "You're gonna lead the walkout," and I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "We're gonna film it just for our own purposes." I was like, "Totally cool." So when everything was happening, like, we went into it knowing we were going to lose. So our strategy was how to like ultimately win while losing the vote.
So if you are here tonight in opposition to this resolution, I invite you now to stand up. Really, stand up and join me and walk out of this room.
That was a wowing moment. To have them just stand up, everyone just kind of was like, what's going on? It was very shocking. As they were leaving, it was just a very big rush of relief to not have that tension, those bad vibes in the room. And so we started cheering, actually, and it was a great moment.
If you're standing in the back, it looks like some seats have opened up.
But the passing of the BDS motion proved to be just the beginning of a bigger story.
That day, all of us released like 50 op-eds in major news sources so that when people made a hashtag and like a whole thing trending, so when people opened their Facebooks, it wouldn't be them celebrating their victory, it'd be us sharing our stories. Once it blew up, then random people, like the Huffington Post contacted me and was like, "Do you have anything to say?" And I was like, conveniently, I wrote an op-ed 2 weeks ago just in case.
Anger and tension running high at the University of California, Davis campus. What you just saw played out late last week as the Student Government Association voted on a resolution to boycott the Jewish state of Israel. Reports say when the Israel supporters tried to object to this vote, the pro-Palestinian students you just saw tried to shout them down with cries of Allahu Akbar. It's incredible to hear Allahu Akbar shouted in the middle of this university.
And what does that represent, Megan? The subjugation of women, the torture of homosexuals, the torture of Christians.
It was a Sunday. I was in the kitchen. My partner was in the living room with my daughter. Came in with her laptop, and she said, "You've got to see this."
Bill Mullen has been a campaigner for the BDS movement for years. His wife had been sent a link to a website containing a letter addressed to her.
This letter purported to be by a former student who said that she had been sexually harassed by me, and she had found other students at Purdue who had had the same experience, and she was writing this letter to tell their story.
With the anti-Israel people, what's most effective, what we found, at least in the last year, is you do the opposition research, put up some anonymous website, and then put up targeted Facebook ads.
Within a very short time, within about 48 hours, we were able to establish that these multiple sites that we had found attacking me had been taken out almost at the same time, and that they were clearly the work of the same people.
Every few hours, you drip out a new piece of the opposition research. It's psychological warfare. Drives them crazy.
One of the accounts said that in the process of supposedly putting my hand on her, I'd invited her to a Palestine organizational meeting. And I thought, well, you're sort of putting your cards on the table there, whoever you are. We found out that a student at Purdue, who I work with, had also been targeted.
A former activist with Students for Justice in Palestine agreed to speak only with her face concealed.
It said that I would get drunk and go and have sex with multiple guys, and that's just a huge attack on my character and a massive lie. My parents were very upset. They immediately told me to quit my involvement with SJP.
They either shut down or they spend time responding to it and investigating it, which is time they can't spend attacking Israel. That's incredibly effective.
The main focus was to attack my reputation and my character. Pretty much to mess with me so that I don't want to continue my involvement with SJP.
It was really an attempt by people who didn't know us to think, maybe I can destroy this marriage at the very least. Maybe I can cause them horrendous personal suffering. The same letter purporting to be harassment to my wife used the name of our daughter. I think that was the worst moment. I think we thought, these people will do anything they're capable of doing anything.
Could you send me some of these websites? I'd be very curious just to see what they look like.
I couldn't.
You couldn't, okay.
But, Canary Mission is a good example. Canary Mission is highly, highly effective to the extent that we monitor the Students for Justice in Palestine and their allies.
I remember it was the morning I was getting ready for school. I was about to graduate at this point, in a pretty cheery mood, I'd say. I got a Facebook message from one of my friends. She goes, "Hey, Marcel, I don't mean to freak you out, but I think you should see this." I click on it, and then I see it's a picture of me, and it's my name, and it's a profile about me. When I saw that this was a website dedicated to taking down pro-BDS activists and painting us all as terrorists and anti-Semitic, it was chaos. It was chaos in my mind. What are people gonna think when they look at my name on Google? Are they gonna think I'm a terrorist? Are they gonna think I don't like Jewish people?
They're picking out individuals who they think are critical of Israel, and they're smearing them. And they're telling them that what's going to happen here is if you don't cease and desist from acting like this, we in the end will do much to destroy your career.
A few years later, these individuals are applying for jobs within your company.
Canary Mission's promotional video threatens to pass these smears on to prospective employers.
To ensure that today's radicals are not tomorrow's employees.
It was shattering to me because I had to look for a job. I had to start my life. And now I had this website smearing my name before I even got a chance to really make a name for myself.
Somebody did contact my employer and asked for me to be fired based on my pro-Palestine activism. They said that, if they continued to employ me, that their values are anti-Semitic. It can be really scary at first. I was mostly harassed via Twitter. They were tweeting me like every 2 or 3 days. They take screenshots, even way back to my Facebook pictures that don't even look like me anymore. Just digging and digging through my online presence.
They're terrified of Canary Mission, and it's about time.
We had always been afraid of ending up on there. It was very personal. They see us as such a threat that they have to kind of twist and turn and delve into our personal lives as if they were trying to scare us into stopping our work. Their Twitter campaign is relentless.
Every picture that I post on Facebook, it goes onto one of their websites with every tweet that I put in. Every hashtag I post on Instagram, it goes into one of their files.
The research operation is very high tech. When I got here a few years ago, the budget was like $3,000. Today it's like $1.5 million or more. Probably it's like $2 million even at this point. I don't even know. It's huge. It's a massive budget. We've got major political consulting firms on retainer that are here all the time. We have our own opposition researchers. We have a lot of communications capabilities, and what's most interesting about it, I think, is that 90% of the people who pay attention to this space very closely have no idea what we're actually doing, which I like.
Caffeinated, I tried it, yeah.
As he left his meeting at the ICC, Tony reflected on the way Jacob Boehme had reacted to his questions about Canary Mission.
We do it securely and anonymously, and that's the key.
It sounds very similar to like a Canary Mission and that kind of thing. Is that, yeah. Are you guys in touch with them at all, or is there any kind of, no?
No, Canary Mission is totally anonymous.
Yeah,
it's hard to figure out who's behind it.
Canary Mission is highly, highly effective to the extent that we monitor the Students for Justice in Palestine and their allies. We're doing it better. I mean, not we, but this anonymous group.
We don't know who's behind it. I would ask where they get their money from, because ultimately that tells you where the control is.
Our undercover reporter, Tony, is having a coffee with Eric, his boss at the Israel Project. Tony wanted to find out more about Canary Mission.
There's a guy named Adam Milstein who you might want to meet. He's a convicted felon. That's a bad way to describe it. He's a real estate mogul. When I was working with him when I was at APAC, I was literally emailing back and forth with him while he was in jail. But he's loaded. I mean, he's close to $500 million.
Adam Milstein has become a central figure in the lobby. His foundation funds numerous pro-Israel organizations. He also sits on the boards of AIPAC's National Council, the Israel on Campus Coalition, and Stand With Us. Our reporter filmed him alongside Jacob Boehm from the Israel on Campus Coalition at the Stand With Us conference in Los Angeles. The two men had lengthy private discussions. Milstein is close to probably the wealthiest donor to the pro-Israel lobby, Sheldon Adelson. Adelson's money helped Milstein expand the Israeli-American Council into a major new force within the lobby. Adelson arrived at the 2016 IAC conference with Rudy Giuliani, now an advisor to President Trump. An IAC video from the conference shows Milstein and Adelson discussing their partnership.
You said you see the vision and you tell us, go and do it. And we took your orders and we made it happen. And we took your money.
There's somebody else around that can give you $50 million?
No, there's no... Sheldon.
Numerous groups from the pro-Israel lobby were attending the conference. An Israeli official gave them a message to pass on to BDS supporters in America.
Everybody out there who has to do anything with BDS should ask himself twice, do I want to be on this side or do I want to be on the other side? If I'm submitting to BDS, what would be the effect? We've got the budget. We can bring things to the table that are quite different.
In episode 1 of The Lobby USA, Tony discovered that the Israeli government has launched a covert campaign to gather information on American citizens.
We have 3 different sub-campaigns: data gathering, working on activist organization, money trail.
The Israeli official named one organization that was a partner in its covert campaign, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or FDD.
This is something that only a country with its resources can do the best. We have FDD. We have others working on this.
She names the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy as an agent for this foreign government going after American citizens. I mean, that quote is a smoking gun.
Yeah. Sorry, are you Jonathan? Hey, I'm Tony.
Hi.
Hi. I met up with Benny Weinstein.
Jonathan Schanzer works for the FDD. He produces research on the financing of armed groups.
Yeah, I'm very interested in getting involved in like BDS activity and stuff like that.
Hopefully anti-BDS.
If you had on tape a senior Russian or Iranian or even Canadian official saying that they were running covert operations to spy on Americans and using an organization like the Foundation for Defense of Democracies as a front group, I think it would be a bombshell.
Think tanks like the FDD play an important role for Israel in the media. Their selective use of evidence is often presented as legitimate academic research.
They try to educate people to understand that Israel is effectively a Western liberal democracy in the sea of terrorist states, which is the Arab world. The other goal is to intimidate and to smear people.
Schanzer is invited by pro-Israel congressmen to provide evidence before subcommittees on terrorism in the Middle East. He uses them to insinuate that prominent activists for Palestinian equal rights are linked to armed groups.
The AMP's founder and president, Hatem Bazian, was one of 2 featured speakers at a 2004 fundraising dinner in California. Incidentally, the other speaker at this dinner was Mohammed Al-Mazain, who is currently in jail for his role in the Holy Land Foundation and for providing financial support to Hamas.
When you entered into the congressional record, now people are begin to think that there's some legitimacy to it. So this dumping of utter nonsense and garbage into the congressional record, into a legitimate hearing, will have an effect down the line.
There's also Osama Abu Ershad. He is currently the National Coordinator and Policy Director for AMP. Mr. Abu Ershad also runs a pro-Hamas newspaper in Virginia.
They made Palestine as a front on the war on terrorism. It was Al-Qaeda that attacked the United States. It wasn't Hamas or any Palestinian organization. It was Al-Qaeda.
I should note here that our open source research did not indicate that AMP or any of these individuals are currently involved in illegal activity.
He himself, in his testimony in Congress, he says, we have no evidence of any wrongdoing by this organization, but still you have to investigate them. So investigate us for what? For doing nothing wrong?
The fact it's rubbish does not mean that people don't listen to it. Right?
Shanza's allegations that American students are somehow connected to armed groups in the Middle East has become part of the lobby's attempt to demonize BDS. Tony's boss, Eric, was also at the event. He's old friends with Noah Pollock.
I want to hire Tony at the Israel press. Tony's another troublemaker from the UK. He's a good guy. Noah's the best.
As Tony left the event with Eric, the conversation turned to smearing BDS supporters. Eric said wealthy pro-Israel donors now have the freedom to fight Israel's critics however they want.
In this country, you have these billionaire types who are starting to realize, like, oh wow, I don't need to participate in the Republican or Democratic parties. I could build my own apparatus and have influence from Los Angeles or Detroit. And Adam Milstein's one of those guys. And he funds the Israel Project. He does a lot of great work.
Eric then made a remarkable claim when Tony asked about Canary Mission.
Who are the people involved with them?
It's him.
Adam Milstein.
Yeah, I don't know who he hired to oversee it. Adam Milstein. He's the guy who funds it.
We need to expose the fact that they're anti-everything we believe in. We need to put them on the run.
So Adam Milstein, he funds the Israel Project and he's funding the Canary Mission website.
Yeah, which is interesting because it makes it seem as though we're a part of it, but we're not. Actually, I was involved with the effort to start it, the name and shame. He called a group of us to ask us what we thought. I told him actually I thought it was a bad idea, but he did anyway.
They've lost the political argument. They can now do nothing but resort to personal smears against us. They can't engage us in discussions of the occupation. They can't defend apartheid. They can't defend the bombings in Gaza, but they can try to destroy our lives.
Kind of really desperate and pathetic almost, going after students, trying to compromise their futures because they're trying to fight for social justice.
I know a guy actually is working with Adam on all sorts of digital spying. There's a group of anonymous people who have a very sophisticated digital strategy for exposing these people and making sure that stuff stays with them. There's no one on their side doing it, so you don't have to worry about your reputation.
Our undercover reporter was attending a dinner at the annual conference of the Israeli-American Council in Washington. He met an American involved in the Israeli government's anti-BDS campaign.
In my job, I get to work with every major news network, and I don't even do media. I do academic work. Every university president takes our calls, takes our meetings, works with us. There's a legitimate government organization.
The discussion was dominated by the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement.
So many organizations focus on BDS, but for the most part, when it comes to BDS, we're very behind the scenes.
I'm meeting with the university president, staff, and students. So what they're doing is building relationships with local politicians, making sure that politicians know to turn to them when Israel-sensitive things come to the table.
If you're disgusted by segregation in this country, if you're disgusted by South African apartheid, then you should also be disgusted by Israeli apartheid.
Another workshop was addressed by Israeli diplomats from consulates in the US. Black Lives Matter had attracted particular criticism after voicing support for the BDS movement. It appears that Israel's diplomats may be trying to challenge the apartheid label by canvassing support amongst African Americans.
The major problem of Israel is with the young generation of the black community. Black Lives Matter starts there. I had last week a dinner, sit-down dinner at my house for 40 people, which are considered the leadership of the black community, and very important people. They can be part of our doing an activity.
Pro-Israel groups are trying to cultivate a new generation of black leaders that is pro-Israel by bringing them to AIPAC conferences on all expenses paid trips, by taking them on delegations to Israel.
Eric told him why Jerusalem is a favorite hub for journalists covering the Middle East.
One of the reasons why Israel's covered disproportionately is the overwhelming majority of journalists covering the Middle East are based in Jerusalem.
Tip is laying the groundwork in the media for a future war between Israel and Hezbollah.
We're preparing for the worst case scenario. If it happens, we have to be ready because that war will be won and lost. You know, the court of public opinion, not on the battlefield.
Journalists based in Jerusalem would likely cover that war. The Israel Project has an office there.
We have an enormous interest in affecting the people who are on the ground there, and that's what they do. They build relationships with people who give them information that they can then feed to journalists who are building relationships with. And so Lure is a staff of about like 20 people. He was chief of staff of the Israeli embassy in D.C. for many years. He's a veteran of Israeli politics, but he was like spokesman for a bunch of government ministries. So he's got a real expertise in dealing with the press. He's an expert at making their jobs easier. So, for instance, we actually now, when there's a terror attack in Israel, our staff gets to the scene usually before the press does. Just because they are so good. They bulletproof vests on, they have cameras, and as soon as there's on Twitter an attack, we have like 4 guys at the scene.
Breaking news overseas, a shooting in the heart of Tel Aviv.
He has this rapid response team where he has people strategically placed around the country. So if there's an attack, like the Sarona attack at Sarona Market in Tel Aviv.
Clearly an attack on a soft target right now based on all the initial preliminary details we're getting from this very fast developing story.
They take pictures and they get testimonies. By the time the press gets there, we do their job slow. They need a quote, they need information, they need a picture, a video clip, and full service, shot. We just give them.
This is new video that just came in, and it shows people in the chaos after this happened, as it is night in Tel Aviv.
By the time the press got there, we were able to help affect the narrative because, they're all scrambling. They need to get stuff to their editors immediately on what happened back in Brussels or Washington, and we're able to get them information.
A TIP employee was interviewed by Fox News.
Liat Delongovitz, who is live with us on the scene, works for the Israeli Project, which puts out news to the foreign press there.
Hi, I'm here on the scene. I arrived fairly early.
They use children to protect.
The former CNN correspondent Jim Clancy first reported on the Middle East in the early 1980s.
Those boundaries.
When Chip begins interacting with journalists and suggesting the lines and suggesting the interviews, then it's not journalism anymore, it's just propaganda.
Liat Delongovitz, who is on scene, again, works for the Israel Project, which works to put news out to the foreign press.
During his volunteership at the Israel Project, Tony saw a letter to a donor explaining how Tip had assisted a journalist from CNN. Tip took Will Ripley on a helicopter tour, which seemingly impressed the reporter.
Once you arrive in Israel, they come up with a series of things. They know you're in town. They have your number. You get the helicopter tour. That's fun. You get some video. that you can use in your reporting. And then they sponsor trips like this one with special access to people that they know, and they can set it up.
I visited the Israeli side of the border with Gaza and can tell you the tension there is palpable. Hamas leaders have stated that they are aggressively expanding their underground labyrinth of tunnels.
This won't help.
The safe room won't protect you from
Not
a tunnel
from that.
attack.
Not from that.
It's a very compelling report, but it's based on an absolute lie.
And there are even reports from some residents they are hearing digging underground.
The document Tony saw claimed the tip's influence created one of the fairest reports on Israel shown recently on a major broadcaster.
For those living close to Gaza, it seems only a matter of time before it happens again.
It keeps me awake at night.
There isn't one recorded case of these tunnels being used to attack Israeli civilians.
The report was presented solely from one side.
The Israel Defense Forces say the average Hamas tunnel is 3 kilometers, nearly 2 miles, costing millions of dollars and tons of valuable concrete, resources badly needed by the long-suffering people of Gaza to rebuild their cities.
TIP fully knows that if you're the journalist in Gaza who's doing a report with Hamas sources, your office is damn well going to require that you put in an Israeli voice to counter some of the things that are said there. They well know that if you are on the Israeli side doing a report with mostly Israeli sources, that same pressure will not be applied. You will be allowed to go ahead without trying to get the other side of the story.
Why is that?
That's because TIP is powerful, and they're going to hold journalists to account.
Dedicated to changing people's minds.
TIP's promotional video explains its role.
We don't attack the media. We become a trusted partner and resource, bringing integrity and facts to the coverage.
But recalled instances when the pro-Israeli lobby exerted influence.
The big media companies will tell you that, well, maybe they won't tell you this, but they have been harassed. If they had Palestinian journalists who knew the ins and outs of the Palestinian Authority, for example, they were blatantly told to get rid of them, that they weren't trustworthy journalists. Whatever a journalist reports, if it's not liked by whether it's TIP or people within the government, they will put pressure on the media houses, the big networks.
TIP's online promotion claims it shapes the way Israel is framed in the international media.
TIP changes the way thousands of media reports appear every year. And then we add platforms of our own, getting people talking, taking command of the conversation.
This last week, but when I was there, I met with both Herzog and Netanyahu. We exist to kind of articulate the reasons that the notion of a Jewish state is a good thing for us as Americans, and it's a good thing for Jews, and a good thing for Israel, and a good thing for the West, and a good thing for everybody.
Block describes the pro-Israel lobby as a three-legged stool, propped up by influencing Congress, shaping policy through think tanks, and thirdly, TIP's role, managing the public discourse.
He was AIPAC spokesman, and he was like the troublemaker. He's always breaking the rules, but always getting done. He's very effective at strategic communications and dealing with journalists. At AIPAC, he was the man. I mean, he could get anything on the front page of the Washington Post.
The Israel Project gained notoriety in 2009 after an internal policy document was leaked. It was a phrasebook for pro-Israel advocates. Key phrases, words that work, were determined from focus groups.
Israel wants peace. I want peace.
We want to move forward in peace. We want to start negotiations immediately.
Stuff that's data-driven. We do a lot of polling. Every month we do a national poll, exactly looking for these kinds of messages that work. Know that people recognize mostly from significant ones. So the headlines are very, very carefully messaged.
If all Palestinians can be referred to as terrorists, as in a terrorist attack, they've won a battle. They've won a battle because that headline will be seen by probably 50 times more people than those who actually went into the article and read the details about it.
You don't have any reporters, you just have three people who churn out carefully crafted headlines with article text that convinces you that the headline is true.
They understand that it's just the 5-word headline or the 6-word headline that carries the message. The point is never to get to the real debate.
Why is Iran so happy about the Iran nuclear deal?
TIP's social media videos had apparently shifted public opinion on the Iran nuclear deal.
The American public started out being in favor of the deal and is now against the deal. It was everything from viral videos, 10-second videos. You can send me the greatest article you want about the Iran deal, but I promise you that a 10-second video will get 1,000 times.
People aren't reading as much, they're not interested. In fact, history's a little bit bunk. A lot of people kind of come up now and there's this notion of postmodernism and nothing is true anymore. We are at this sort of interesting moment in time where we need to understand what it is that affects people's understanding and perceptions about what's right and what's wrong and how they work. This visual stimulus and stuff. How are people learning things?
There are also other things that we do that are completely off the radar. When we work together with a lot of other organizations, we produce content that they then publish with their own name on it.
The Israel Project is supplying what it calls white label, that is unbranded content, to other outlets.
We're putting together a lot of pro-Israel media through various social media channels that aren't the Israel Project's channel. So we have a lot of side projects that we're trying to influence the public debate with. So that's why it's a secretive thing, because we don't want people to know that these side projects are associated with the Israel Project.
TIP runs a collection of Facebook communities that cover topics ranging from history and the environment to current affairs and feminism. But their affiliations to the Israel Project are deliberately vague.
Why is it that they can't be connected to the Israel Project?
I think it's because, we want people to view them as objectively as possible. We have a team of 13 people, and we're working on a lot of videos, explainers. A lot of it is just random topics, and then maybe 25% of it would be Israel or Jewish based.
The Israel brand is increasingly toxic. So you can't sell Israel directly. You have to have sort of other hip stuff that's just very innocuous, fun, and then from time to time you're going to slip something about Israel in.
Is the idea that all the rest of the non-Israel stuff is to allow the Israel stuff to pass better? That's the key thing?
Just that we want to blend in everything.
TIP's mission is to eliminate any mention of apartheid and occupation. Don't look here, look over here.
The visual medium is trumping words. Get more image, more visual, more accessible, non-heavy thinking stuff.
Kittens are easy to sell. Apartheid is a much harder product to get people to buy.
More and more people will use the word apartheid when they talk about Israel. The end result is that the lobby has to work extremely hard today and will have to work even harder over time to defend Israel. And of course, in part, this means doing everything that can be done here in the United States and in the West more generally to discredit the BDS movement, because the BDS movement is so dangerous to Israel.
Tony had gathered that the lobby's concern with BDS was not its economic impact, but a much wider threat to the power of the pro-Israel lobby.
The specific potential of an immediate boycott, that's not a problem. What's a bigger problem is the Democratic Party, the Bernie Sanders people, bringing all these anti-Israel people, and the Democratic Party being pro-Israel is less of a bipartisan issue. And then, every time the White House changes, policies towards Israel change, and that becomes a dangerous thing for Israel. There is an actually important battle being fought on the campuses.
For half a century, bipartisanship has been the cornerstone of AIPAC's success, as its website video explains.
By some measures, Democrats and Republicans are more divided today than at any other time in the last 2 decades. But America's support for Israel transcends partisan politics. So when it comes to strengthening America's relationship with Israel, support must come from both sides of the aisle. That's where AIPAC comes in.
What's begun to happen over the past decade is that support for Israel has begun to wither away in the Democratic Party. And in contrast, support for Israel in the Republican Party has begun to increase. And what you see is there is a substantial difference today in support for Israel in the two parties.
AIPAC has moved so far to the right that it's losing the young people. By the time of the next presidential election, Democrats will not glibly, in a debate, say, if they're running for president, and I love Israel, and I'm a diehard supporter of Israel. The terrain has changed dramatically.
We must join together and organize if we are to overcome this powerful lobby. You can help. Contact If Americans Knew and share this video with everyone you know.